So you want to get your Tyranids looking sharp, pinstripe sharp, or you just want to see exactly how I paint Highfleet Voro, this is the place to see it. Hi guys, Aceface back with another video for you. I've had plenty of requests over the recent couple of weeks around how I paint my Highfleet Voro, particularly how kind of the latest incarnation of the colour scheme is. So I've kind of brought down my latest Trigon Prime so you can kind of see it. So a lot of people are really interested in particularly how to paint the very vivid, striking pinstripe style. Slowly but surely my Highfleet has been evolving into more and more this type of style, and it's getting sharper, it's getting brighter, and it's getting more striking each kind of incarnation of this colour scheme. So I've had a lot of people asking how exactly I do it, and a few people asking for a tutorial. Now I don't really do tutorials, so excuse me if it's a little bit scruffy and not massively polished, but I'm going to do my best, guys, to show you exactly how I paint this particular colour scheme, and I'll show it to you pretty much live on camera, and then you can hopefully follow it through. Now this colour scheme is obviously my own colour scheme, but you could use a different variation of colours using the same technique to produce exactly the same style. And depending on the colours you use, you'll get different results, and some things will work and look really strong, other things will look weaker. It's just a bit of a trial and error, and give it a go. But I'd be really interested to see. Let me know how you get on in the comments below. So we'll jump right in. So let's pop this guy to one side for a second, and I will use him to explain things as we go through. So the colours you're going to need now, the variation of these colours, again, you can use different companies. You don't need to use these particular paints, and they're just the ones I'm using at the moment, and I've used lots of different colours for my Highfleet Voro, and I'll give you some examples of some other ones you can use. So the base colour that I use at the moment is from Militaire range, which is, I think they're produced by Badger. They're a US company. They're harder to get over here in the UK, but you can get hold of them. If you just Google it or look on eBay, you can get hold of them. And the colour is Royal Blood, and it's quite a watered down colour, so you do need plenty of layers, but it's a really rich, beautiful blue. The closest kind of GW one you're looking for is Cantor Blue. It works really well. Cantor Blue I've used plenty of times in the past, and it works well. After that, your first layer, currently I'm using this one, and this is Lagoon Blue, which is a nice bright blue. The pigments work really well with the Royal Blue, Royal Blood. So that's the second colour. I then use, I've got the wrong one out there for a minute, I use then light sea blue as the kind of final highlight. We do go one higher, but I use that. And then for the extreme little touches, we use a real pure white, and I really like the Vallejo white, but you can use any white, just make sure it's nice and thinned down. And this just allows me to mix it really kind of seamlessly into these colours to give me a nice effect. And then the only other colour that I would recommend that you need is a glaze, and you need the Gilliman glaze. I really like this. It really works well with this range of colours. I've not found another glaze currently that I like as much, but I'm sure there's plenty more out there. So those are the colours that you'll need to exactly replicate this, but you can use variations. So what we've got today is we've got old Swarmlord. So what I've done, I'm repainting up Swarmlord. He's very thinly painted in the first place, and I'm very happy with the green, but the grey and the blue is not up to the standard of the new paint job, so we're starting to bring him up to where we need to. So what we're going to work on is his headpiece, and this is a conversion. So it's quite a lot of green stuff in there, which means that it's not perfectly smooth, so it'll be harder to do than potentially other flat surfaces, but you should be able to get a really good idea. So unfortunately we're going to get some focus issues as it tries to focus into the trigon behind, but there we go. So what I've done is I've started off by giving this a nice coat of the royal blood, to a standard that I'm quite happy with. It's nice smooth coat on there, and as you can see it has quite a satiny finish, which really does help, and I'll explain why as we go through the process. So that's how we start it off. I'm going to move this camera slightly over to the centre here so you can see him, and as I said, not very used to doing kind of painting tutorials, but I will do my best to kind of show you how I do it. So we've now got that royal blood over it, which is looking cool. So now we're going to go into the lagoon blue, and we're going to pop this down here. You won't be able to see it, but we'll pop this down here, some drops of that. And I'm going to use for this, I'm going to use I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7, and I'm using a 1 to start off with to get these stripes down. Okay, now what we're doing, got the swarm rod here, we'll turn it over so we get, I like to go that way with my stripes, so start off with the surface bit and bring them down to the edge, so you kind of start with the very thinnest and you're going to slightly fatter at the end to kind of give the effect. So we'll get some on a brush, and as I said, we'll have a go for you. So this first bit's the hardest because you've got a long surface to go down, and it's obviously very eye-catching because it's right near where his face is. And what happens when you look at a model is you naturally will look at the eyes, because it's a human reaction to first of all zoom in on the eyes, which is why on a model, if the eyes are poor, even if the rest of the model is beautifully painted, quite often it will put you off the model. So we're just establishing this first line, and you know, the good thing with it being a Tyranid, an organic creature, is this does not need to be beautifully straight. There's lots of angles, lots of shapes, it can move around them, it doesn't matter. That's the half the beauty of this colour scheme, is it's the concentration of these stripes that give it the effect. It's not one stripe, it's not two stripes, but you can see there, hopefully what we're doing now, you can see, is we're just bringing these stripes down. Again, you don't need to leave any set distance between the stripes. You can use any sort of distance you want. You can use any type of thickness of stripe you want. Again, it doesn't matter. We'll go with what you kind of feel. As I said, mine are, they're basically probably a couple of brush strokes thick when you kind of get to the edge of it. And again, all I'm doing is just kind of going over them, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of just getting to the edges and just thickening it and making sure that that stripe looks really defined at the edge. You want to try, when you get to the centre of these carapaces, make sure that your central line is really quite nicely and defined. That will eventually be kind of probably your highlightest part of it when you kind of finish off the model. So you want that to be really kind of straight and a nice clean stripe. So hopefully you can see here. And what I'm purposely doing is I'm not worrying too much around the front, because I'll almost tackle that slightly separately. I'm going from kind of the midpoint, just past the midpoint, and I'm just bringing it down to give me that really nice kind of stripe, and you can see it coming together and it's looking quite nice already. Quite pleased with that. Let's try again. So there's a little bit too much paint on my brush here. This is going to have to be careful with this one. No, we're happy with that, that's cool. Bringing it down, and again just fattening it up a little bit as we get to the end. We'll just try and give that one a little bit more of a tail to it. There we go. So starting to get a bit of a dry edge on the paint, so just going to kind of wash that off a little bit. Get ready to kind of come back in. So as again, as I said to you, this is a conversion. We've got quite a messy bit on the end here now. It's fine, you don't really see it, but it's not completely smooth. So I'm going to have to do this in a kind of couple of little bits, because we've got a little blob bit there, which is fine. It's not going to affect the overall look of it. It's going to look absolutely fine. And then we're going to go right on that corner there, and we're going to get one little stripe in there as well. And we'll just turn it right over here. We've got a little gap here, so we're going to define another little bit down here. It's the same thing again, so this one's a little bit messy, so we'll just kind of bring it in there. Oh, it's kind of gone a little bit separated there, but that's fine, and that's the thing that's about it that's really nice. Again, once this has sort of several highlights, it can have some slight little imperfections where that stripe will kind of go astray a little bit. It's fine to do. I'll show you, kind of give you an example. It's fine to do sort of, if you've got like a little, you might want to have like a little tiny stripe in between. If I can get one in there, like that. So you can have a little one in there. You know, you could look around and go, oh, actually I'm going to have another little one in there. And that's cool. That's part of the thing. You don't want it to look too manufactured, too kind of perfect. Otherwise, you're going to lose the fact there's a Tyranid. Right, okay, so we're going to have one there, we have a little one in there again, and I'm happy with that. So let's bring that into focus so you can see it. That is your first stripe. So what I'll do now is just go away and I'll paint all of this up and we'll come back. Okay, and then when you've finished, it should look roughly something like this. So there's your kind of first layer. What you can see I've done kind of on the front is I just decided to kind of give him just some random kind of half stripes that come up a little bit from just above his mouth. I just think it looked quite cool. So that's what I've done with that, but you can do it however you want. So once you've kind of got to that stage, you've got the main stripes down, and actually that's probably the hardest work done. That's where just defining those initial stripes is really important. You want it to look nice and clear. You want it to look nice and crisp. That will kind of help you to kind of go from there, and that's kind of your starting point. After you've got to that stage, the next part, to be fair, the next part is not the easiest part, but it's probably not as important. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to define those slightly more so by just giving the edge of the carapaces a slight little highlight. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. So, and this is quite fiddly, just take your time with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go along the edge of each of the carapaces sections, you know, and again, less is more. The more subtle, the more it won't necessarily strike out, but what it will do is it will just make those stripes look that little bit sharper. Okay, let's try and go down this line for you so hopefully you can see this. I'm looking at the model rather than the screen because I'm not that good. So it's going to go down there. Hopefully you can see that kind of defining quite nicely. And you see the difference. Now as this blue, same as most colours, as this blue kind of dries, it slightly darkens a little bit. So when you look at this, it will look, when I first lay it down, it will look really quite bright around those edges. But once we kind of finish it and we get everything else in, that kind of edge highlight around the side, that edge highlight along the side will kind of fade away quite a lot and you won't even notice it. It will just, when you look at it very close, you'll see how clear and crisp those stripes will look. So again, we're just going to go down this side here, making it look really nice and bright. And they'll look really nice and defined. So we're just going to go down. And just going down the side of that. That's one side almost done. I'll go along the side of that. And it's really, really important. So a lot of people are doing these sort of the edge highlights on the side of these carapaces. It's ever so important that you don't do the fronts and that just do it very thinly. If you do this thickly, it will make the model look very clumsy. You'll lose the kind of delicateness of it. So don't do that. You know, literally just take your time with that, and just, as I said, less is more. You just want a fine little highlight along that edge. And the finer it is, as I said, probably the better. Just want it to kind of almost finish them stripes, so those stripes look like they come from this thin line. It will just make it look that much neater and tidier. So we're just going to finish this off, and then we'll go on to the next stage. Let's do that last one. There we go. Get that all in there. So that's now what it looks like, and I think hopefully you can see the difference there. It's a very, very subtle line, but it just pops it that little bit more. Okay, so after that we're going to now take it up a level. So we're now going to go in with the light sea blue. Now this is very, very bright, and this wants to be nowhere near as prominent as the last layer, otherwise the model's going to look a bit silly. So again, when you get to this highlight, and whether you're using your own colour, whatever you're using, it's absolutely fine, but just think this colour is going to look probably about 5 times as bright as the one you've just put down. So you need to be careful that you don't go crazy, because you can always go in and define it that little bit more afterwards, but it's much harder to re-establish that initial colour. And if you go over the line, so you make this line too thick, then you're going to have to make basically your whole stripe thick. And again, you don't really want to do that. And what you're aiming to do on this, and you can deviate from this slightly, but what you're aiming to do from this is actually go just slightly inside of the line that you've already done. So and it is ever so slightly, and it's not really noticeable on the camera or even when you're actually looking at the model, but what it will have is you can see the fade on the stripe, and I think you can make it out. It looks like there's a slight fade, and that fade gives kind of a little bit of give the eye a little bit of a trick that there's slight more complexity to the stripe than there actually is. And that's where the beauty of the pinstriping comes in, because that makes it look much more three-dimensional. It makes it look a lot sharper, and it makes the colour scheme look that much more striking. If you just went ploughing in with like a full, big, thick, bright stripe, it would look bright and it would look eye-catching, but it would look scruffy, and your actual brush strokes would look a lot more noticeable. Stake there and get it straight away, and no problem. And so as you get the thinner stripes, it becomes harder. Just really being very, very careful, because I know that actually if I want to thicken these up, I can thicken them up at any time. It's not a problem. But if I thicken them up too much, I'm going to get a disaster result. So we're getting to the end of this side, and what I'll do is, again, I will cut back after we've finished this whole part, and I'll show you what it looks like. So we're going to do a little bit there, and that's looking pretty good. So we'll come back when that's finished. So there we go, that's after that layer has finished. You can see just how much more now it is popping. It's quite bright in here, so it probably doesn't necessarily do it 100% justice, but I think you can see where the fade is, fade from one end to the other, and that is all down to, as I said, and you would have seen it, is again, if you keep to that process of kind of keeping the pin this side and then getting it thicker at the edge, it looks like it blends into the last stripe a little bit more, So what I'll do now is, I keep putting my hand in my paint, it's just down where you can't see it, but anyway. So what I'm going to do now is, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just define the edge of just the top of these. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to just kind of pick out just kind of the middle pieces. Hopefully you can kind of see. So I'm just doing exactly what I did before with the edges, but all I'm doing is I'm just picking out the middle sections of each of them. And again, less is more. I'm not going crazy. It's not a thick line. It's very subtle. You know, potentially you could even like miss it out and you wouldn't even notice. But what it does is it just adds again to the vividness, makes it pop a little bit more, defines that kind of graduation of the brightness of the stripes, just going up that little bit more. And again, we're all working kind of to the middle, so that middle bit is looking striking and looking bright. And you'll see why that really kind of helps when we get to pretty much the final few parts of this. So again, and then we just do it on the top like that. You can see there, really nice and bright and vivid. So that's that stage done. So you know, you can see already he's looking pretty cool. Quite happy with how he's looking. I think he's the effect is working well. So we have, I don't know, so now that we have, let's say the boring bits, they're not boring, but what we're going to do now is we're going to go in with some white, and this is where you start to see a real difference between it. It absolutely go from looking really striking to incredibly popping. And again, it's all about doing this subtly, not going crazy. You could always come back and do more afterwards. So unlike before, where we were hitting every single stripe, what we want to do now with the white, and I'm only using a tiny little bit, is just defining the bits where we want it to absolutely pop. So I'm hitting just the odd kind of stripe, and I'm only really just tapping the surface of it. As you can see there, just pretty much just tapping the surface of it, just to give it a real kind of pop. You want it to be random. You don't want to always pick the same ones on each line. You don't want them just to be a dot on some of them. Some of them you want to go a little bit further on. It is quite random, and you kind of have to, I can't tell you the exact recipe for it, and you'll see. So what we do is we just literally just start at that beginning bit there, and we just get a little nice little bit of white in it. Do on the other side again, so just picking that top there, just getting it on the side, you know. And this side, this time we're kind of going a little bit against the grain of what we've done it previously. So previously we were working more the other way, now we're working more the opposite. And this stage we're not, as I said, we're really not going crazy, we're just picking a few little bits and just making them look a little bit whiter, as you can kind of see there. So that's the first stage, and I'm kind of happy with that. I might just put a bit more white down, run out of white on my palette, just put a little bit more down. I think we want maybe just a couple more at the front here. Make that a little bit more defined. So one over here. Like that. Yeah, that's cool, we like that. As I said, there isn't really a rhyme and reason to it, guys. You just have to kind of just go with it and just decide where you want to kind of give it a little bit of an extra pop. You know, in theory it's where the light's hitting the carapace, but it's an unnatural thing, so it's not just on that, you just have to kind of go with it. So I'm really happy with that now. Those last few ones I think made it pop as I wanted it to. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in with the glaze. So we're going to use, as I said at the beginning, we're going to use Guilliman glaze, and I'm going to go up to a slightly bigger brush. So I've got here, so sorry, on that last stage I should have said we went down to a kind of 0, but now we're going to go back up to the 1. We're going to crack open the Guilliman glaze, and we're going to give it a glaze over the top. So load up your brush and try not to knock over the paint as I do it, and also put my hand in the paint I've already done. And with this one we want to turn the guy over. We want to work from inside where the carapace is. We want to move it, and we want to just put it across. We really, and I can't stress this enough, do not want this to pull. If it pulls, it looks pretty tragic, because what will happen is you'll see your clear kind of stripe, and you suddenly see this bit of glaze, and it'll be like it just looks horrendous. So you've got to be careful that it doesn't. You've got a little bit of time with this, I think even more so than you do with the washes. Again, as I said, so you are covering the whole thing, but you're concentrating it much more into the gap. You're using it as a wash in that regard, because it's giving you extra effect, extra darkening where you want it to be, which is kind of giving that blend and that stripe that much more effect. But you're still doing it all over, giving it a kind of gloss feel. So I think we're pretty much there. And this doesn't take too long to dry, but what I'd suggest is you don't necessarily just go away and leave it. Go on to some other part of your model, or you've got another one waiting, whatever you're doing. I wouldn't leave this, and the reason why I wouldn't leave this is because what you'll find is as this glaze moves around, it will pull, and you need to be there to, as it pulls, just to kind of save it. So we'll wait for that to dry. I'll keep an eye on things, and we'll come back to you for the next stage. Okay, so now that has dried, it's only a subtle difference, but you should see that what it's done is it's kind of tied in those stripes and tightened them up a little bit. Where you're layering rather than blending, it does a lot of the blending for you, so it saves you having to blend those two stripes in together, because it will find the midpoint on its own, which gives you a look of a blend. So it's kind of a bit like a cheat or a hack, as they say. So we're now into pretty much the final parts of this, and you can leave it at that point, and that's fine, and that's ready to go. But what I like to do now is I like to just use the tiniest drop of the sea blue, and then what I'm going to do on areas I just feel it needs redefining, where the wash has maybe washed it out a bit too much, just going to go over it just to make sure really happy with that stripe. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to check all them, and we'll come back. Okay, so you probably can't see many differences, but I've just kind of gone through and I've just topped up a few of those bits. And now I'm going to do the same, which is the very final touch, and it's with the white. Now, I'm going to be really careful, guys. You really want to almost do this on camera. This is the most delicate part, because we're now working with a pure white that we've washed it, we've done everything else. If we go too heavy on this, we basically kill the model, because it's just suddenly going to look silly. So you have to be so careful. So I'm not happy with that. So this, it was too much of a dot, so I've just had to kind of define it into a stripe a bit more. So yeah, going a bit quiet, guys, because this is really important. I have to make sure that this bit is on point, because this is what the eye gets drawn to first and foremost, is these white highlights. You are literally just flicking the brush across. You don't want it to look like a spot. You want it to look, and you can get away with it looking like more of a spot on smaller parts. But when you're doing a big piece like this, so like a really defined area where everyone's going to be kind of looking at first, it needs to be a bit more than just a spot. It needs to be quite a defined little stripe. And I think we're just going to be ever so careful and just perfect. Do this tiniest little bits like that. Like that. And I think I'm very happy with that. And that's how you do it. That's how you do the carapace of High Fleet Voro, and how you can then do that for whatever kind of colour scheme you want to do. So it worked just fine if you used green up to almost like a bright yellow highlight. You could do it on purples up to, again, almost a white but going to a very light purple. You know, you name it, you could do it with any real colour. You just have to work out how those colours flow into one another so you get a graduation. But it's really achievable in lots of different ways. So hopefully you find that useful. I'm now going to do, obviously not for today, for this tutorial, what I will do is I will do another tutorial on how to do the greens, which is very simple, much simpler than that, and it'll be a very short video, but I know people want to know how to do it, so we'll do one on that. And if you're interested on how I do bases, so we've got that one, or let's show you sort of one without. Just a really simple but very effective base, and this is one of the easiest things that you could do, and very cheap and cheerful. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To see the tutorial on how to do these bases, you need to pop over to our sister channel, which is Twisted Dice, and go and check that out there. I'll put a link below so you can drop over and see that, how to do these very simple effective bases. But until the next video, thanks very much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe. It helps me a ton, and if you want to support me, there's a link to my Patreon account down below. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.